Above Cimabue's portrait of St. Francis of Assisi, I've typed the words Pax e Bonum. Francis once heard a beggar offering this greeting. It means peace and goodness, or peace and wellness, and Francis adopted this phrase as his own. One now sees this phrase on or around Franciscan buildings all over the world. The Franciscan legacy is truly global in impact. There are Franciscans and Franciscan institutions all over the planet, but the centre of it all is Assisi in Italy. In this clip, we'll talk about the town of Assisi and going on pilgrimage to Assisi. I invite you to be in peace and in goodness while you view this clip. Assisi is in the centre of Italy, in the region called Umbria. It's an easy commute from the major cities of Rome, Florence, Milan and Venice. It's an important historical centre, largely because of St. Francis, but not entirely. There are Roman remains here from about 300 BC, and several very old Christian sites. The town converted to Christianity in 238 AD, relatively early for Europe. Assisi is located in an area that's prone to earthquakes. There have been over 40 earthquakes since the Basilica of St. Francis was constructed in the 12th century. Only one earthquake, however, the last one in 1997, has had any significant impact on this precious architectural site. Visiting the Basilica today, one would not know that it was once the victim of an earthquake that was number 6 on the Richter scale. Millions of people visit Assisi each year, and I've been there on pilgrimage twice in the last 5 years. Assisi and Francis has a universal appeal. It's not a regular Catholic pilgrimage site. The first World Day of Prayer for Peace was held in Assisi on 27 October 1986. Pope John Paul II invited 160 religious leaders from around the world to the city to pray for peace. The built environment of Assisi and the surrounding countryside is truly stunning. On this slide, you'll see some photos of the beautiful buildings of Assisi. The two larger photos are of the Basilica of St. Francis from different angles. The Basilica is the second most important basilica in Italy, after St. Peter's in Rome. The basilica is comprised of two churches, one on the upper floor and one on the lower floor, as well as a crypt where St. Francis and some of the friars are buried. Work on the lower church started following the canonization of Francis in 1228, and miraculously the basilica was completed 2 years later. Francis's body was translated to the church then. The construction of the upper church was completed in 1253, taking over 20 years to build and another 100 years or so to complete the interior decoration. There are at least 92 works of art in the basilica depicting St. Francis, 65 in fresco, 16 in glass, 6 in wood, 2 in stone or terracotta, 2 in bronze and 1 mosaic. The photograph in the bottom right is the upper church of the basilica. This church has frescoes from 28 episodes from the life of St. Francis. These are generally believed to be painted by Giotto, and it includes the famous painting of St. Francis preaching to the birds. In art history, there's something which is known as the Assisi problem. The true identity of the frescoes in the upper church is in dispute. Whether it was Giotto, his subordinates, or someone else is a matter of scholarly debate. I really encourage you to visit Assisi. St. Francis's prayer and prophecy for the town is on this slide, and just in case you can't read it, let me share it with you now. Be blessed of the Lord, O you holy city, faithful to God, because many souls will be saved through you, and many servants of the Most High will dwell within you, and from you many will be chosen for the eternal kingdom. And when one visits Assisi, the true meaning of that prayer of Francis comes to light. On this slide, the main photo is the Basilica of St. Francis. The top right photo is the interior of the lower church of the Basilica, and the photo in the bottom right is the front of the church of Santa Maria Sopra Minerva. This church was originally a 1st century BC Roman temple. The UNESCO heritage listing for Assisi was done in 2000, and it's very interesting to read the justification for inscribing the town on the World Heritage Register. I'm just going to summarise now the key points. They said that Assisi represents an ensemble of masterpieces of human creative genius, such as the Basilica of San Francisco, which have made it a fundamental reference for art history in Europe and the world. The city has significantly contributed to the development in art and architecture in the world, and Assisi represents a unique example of a continuity of a city sanctuary within its environment. The city's been closely associated with the cult and diffusion of the Franciscan movement throughout the world, focusing on the universal message of peace and tolerance, even to other religions or beliefs. The food in Assisi is absolutely excellent. Every meal I've ever had there has been great. Whether one is drawn to the gelato or the pastry or the truffles, you're sure to enjoy the food here very much. If one wants to go on pilgrimage in honour of St. Francis, the two main sites to visit are Assisi and Laverna. Assisi has several sites of significance, and the energy of the town is unique and powerful. The presence of spirit is palpable here. There are several churches identified on the screen, as well as many sites in nature to visit. And if time permits, you could easily spend a week in Assisi. Laverna is also very important. This is where St. Francis received the stigmata. You can easily visit it on a day trip from Assisi, although you might even want to stay in or around Laverna. There are some other places nearby if you have a longer amount of time available. In Foligno, there is a church dedicated to St. Francis on the site of the first Franciscan hostel in the town, and it was home to the Franciscan Judas, Brother Elias, and that's a story for another clip. There's also a plaque in the main square in Foligno that says this is all where it all began. In other words, this is the place where Francis sold his father's merchandise to raise that money that he needed to restore the church. Perugia is another possibility for a day trip. This is where St. Francis spent a year in prison when he was involved in that soldiering early in his life. And Gubbio is a town nearby which is most famous for the story of St. Francis healing a dispute between a wolf and the townsfolk. But this is also the place where Francis went as a young man after giving up his wealthy life. It was in Gubbio that he received his first cloak, and it was here that he decided to help the lepers. There is a church in honour of St. Francis in Gubbio, which is built on the site where he was given refuge. These are photos of orbs and spirit activity from Assisi. These are very common. The orb photos were taken from the place where I like to stay, and they're taken looking toward the Basilica of St. Francis or down on the plains. The photo on the top right is really interesting. This is a felled tree on Mount Subbiazo, and a cross has been carved into the top of the stump, and if you look carefully you can see there's this brilliant white light coming down on the cross. There are more orbs in these photos. So the top right is an orb on the painting by Cimabue. The bottom right is an orb on the crucifix of San Gimignano, the original crucifix. And the large photo shows many orbs in the lower church of the Basilica of St. Francis. Within walking distance of the city walls of Assisi is Mount Subbiazo, and on the mountain is a Franciscan hermitage that is called the Ermo. The hermitage includes one of the caves where St. Francis would go on retreat, and it's possible to visit the cave, and in that cave you can see the small stone bed that he used, and in an adjacent room is a lovely little altar with a small cross that references the famous crucifix of San Gimignano. The grounds surrounding the Hermitage are stunning, beautiful forests. It also includes several caves or grottos that were used by various other Franciscan brothers when they were going into seclusion. The energy on the mountain is really pure and strong and beautiful. I took this photograph outside the Cave of St. Francis when I was on retreat in 2011. If you look carefully, you may see the materialization of the Spirit of St. Francis in the center of this image. Obviously, I'd been praying to St. Francis while I was in his cave, and I was blessed to capture this photograph immediately after I came out from my prayers. These are photos that were taken at the Hermitage. 3 of these photos, all but the photo in the top right, were taken outside the Cave of St. Francis a few months ago in 2015. The photographs were taken by different people with different cameras, and yet all reveal obvious spirit activity over that tree with the pale green leaves. This is the same tree that was in the image that I captured in 2011. I learned this year that there is a tradition that believes that St. Francis preached to the birds in front of this tree. We'll talk some more about that story in another clip. There are numerous beautiful statues of St. Francis throughout Assisi. The ones in this slide were taken near the main sites. 2 of them come from the area around the Hermitage we've just been discussing. One is from the Church of San Gimignano, and the other is from the Church of St. Mary of the Angels. The image on this slide also comes from Assisi. In fact, the man on horseback is a bronze statue of St. Francis returning from soldiering. And the message here is one which I particularly like and encourage you to reflect on. This is the second in a series of clips aimed at providing some background about St. Francis ahead of our meditation day at the Cottesloe Civic Centre in Perth on Sunday the 4th of October 2015. Just reminding you that it's essential that you register online if you wish to attend this special meditation event. For people who are interested in pilgrimage to holy sites connected with the entities of the Casa Dominatio de Loyola, you might like to visit my website www.8pilgrims.com. That's the number 8pilgrims.com, the address on this screen.